I think people overlook comms because they take it for granted. It's like water and electricity. Most people don't think too deeply about that either until it's taken away from them. And then they're like, whoa. Our neighbors aren't trying to disrupt our communications, right? The town next over isn't trying to take down our communications or hack into them and intercept our calls and all that. In the markets that we serve, our customers, right, the US military, militaries in general, that is absolutely the case from day one.
Imagine you get on a bullet train, and then imagine you're on the bullet train for 2 hours, and all you see are factories and high rises. That is Southern China. That is the factory of the world. China is still run by a cadre of engineers. We were that way until the 60s and 70s, and now we're run by lawyers. That is really one of the fundamental issues we have here, right? Which is afraid of being sued versus a necessity to build the next evolution of technology. You know what I mean?
I would like to see us get back there. I think we need to begin investing. So it's got to start. It's got to be like schools. It's got to be policy regulations, like real stuff to make it cool again, to invest in it again. Whether it's like subsidies, whatever you want to call it, government investment has to be there.
Today's guest is a veteran tech executive with decades of experience scaling companies across semiconductors, software, AI, and communications. Everybody please welcome Omar Javed. As a former counter-UAS guy, I just love the idea. I mean, that you guys have kind of rethought how we're doing stuff from the ground up. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is. I joined in October.
Yep.
And I don't have a background in defense tech.
Yeah.
I've been a Silicon Valley tech exec for a long time.
Yeah.
And I spent a good part of my career in mobile, which is kind of a long way of saying there's a lot of these things that I worked on in different parts of my career, which are making it into fruition, right, in a completely different industry. So the biggest gap I have right now is basically understanding how to sell into and how the military and the US government works. But I'm moving quickly in that regard. Yeah. But the product, the technology, I mean, this is a company that, I don't know how much you know about us, but it started like the two guys that started it were really ex-NSA. They were like one is particle physics, PhD. So it was really kind of an R&D, a company doing deep R&D, coming from academic backgrounds, then working in the NSA. And then I think within the NSA, they were actually put out into the field. So they got to work with operators. And so they saw, that was the basis of the company. I would say the thing is that's different. They originally started and said, okay, we're going to have these fundamental set of technologies, and we really wanted to be the next Qualcomm, right?
Yeah, for
Another
sure.
San Diego company.
Yeah, of course.
So we're going to revolutionize wireless communications, bring in fundamental security, et cetera, which, by the way, as a very, very long-term play, that might be a great way, sort of a great opportunity for us. But that's going to be a really, really tough road to hoe. But what was cool about it, and this is one of the reasons I joined, and part of, I think the timing is good given all of the things that are going on, is that we basically applied that R&D that we did, that research that we did in the wireless arena, trying to solve this for like 5G, 6G, 7G, right? And applied it towards this area, which is, UAS drones.
Yeah. So why don't you back up a step here? Tell me a little bit more about your career journey.
Sure.
And, then how we got to Rampart.
Yeah. So I've been an entrepreneur twice.
Cool.
I started two companies. The first one I started when I was in undergrad. And the second one was after, I think I was in the workforce for a couple of years, I decided to start my second company. And that company, Mobilosity, got acquired by Qualcomm. So that's what got me. I grew up in Michigan. That company was in the East Coast. That's what got me to California. So I've been here now for more than 20 years. And that was a company in mobile technologies. So I spent a very big part of my career in mobile, right? which is big now. But if we look at where it was, you know, you had McKinsey, I think it was McKinsey or Bain, one of those big consulting groups that said that the market for cell phones is very small. It's just going to be like wealthy business people, right?
Yeah.
And they were dead wrong, right? That became the original wave, which is what kind of created the Qualcomms of the world. Was no one in the world having a cell phone to 6 billion people, right? Having cell phones, 7 billion people, whatever the population of the world is these days. And then the second wave was going from feature phones to smartphones, right? To mobile computers, which is the world that we're living in now. So what kind of got me here to Rampart is a lot of the technologies that we're working on, I would say even in drones, right? And Qualcomm is a player in the drone chipset market. Is you had this big market, multi-billion unit market, this scale market. All of these things, there's a lot of, so the chipsets, the RF front ends, right? The radios, memory, other kinds of sensors, so like cameras, right? So a lot of this stuff, you know, the cameras, the sensors, like the camera sensors, the GPS units, all of that kind of stuff, they were either created or scaled and got to the price point that we all needed to create other industries like the one we're in, courtesy of the mobile phone market. I don't know if you see it similarly or if you've experienced that, but that's my experience coming from where I've come from. So there's a lot of experience and applicability that I have here, even though it's like, if you just kind of look at it on paper, it's not it's not what I've been doing for most of my career.
I think you're pulling on a good thread here, right? And that's that all of the components that go into making the drone.
Yeah.
A lot of times people don't actually understand how expensive they are.
Yep.
How backed up the supply chain is.
That's right.
And then, they're like, hey, I want 1,000 drones. We're like, okay, so do you want me to sit on $1,000 of $20,000 cameras? I'm sorry, 1,000 units of $20,000 cameras?
That's right.
That's a lot to hold.
That's right.
Why do you think, and we can narrow in on comms because that's where your specialty. Why do you think comms kind of gets overlooked in the overall drone picture?
It's a great question. You know what? I think in a way, this area is overlooked, and it's overlooked because that industry has kind of become a victim of its own success. In other words, if you look at everybody's got a cell phone, most people don't think too deeply about all the things that go into making their cell phone, right? They just want to be able to send and receive calls, make FaceTime calls, send text messages, download apps, do certain things, right? Use Uber, use DoorDash, whatever, right? They don't think too deeply. In fact, I don't know if you have this experience, because I've been in the technology industry my entire career, and I've been interested in technology my entire life. So I've got a very large extended family, so I'm tech support for them as well.
Sure, of course.
And so I don't know if you've run into this, like people, even really, really smart, they don't understand the difference between like, okay, here's cellular from a carrier and Wi-Fi at home. They confuse the two, right?
Yep.
Or broadband. And so I think people overlook comms because they take it for granted. It's like water and electricity. Most people don't think too deeply about that either until it's taken away from them. And then they're like, whoa.
Yeah. No, it truly is like a fundamental thing we all now expect to have at all times. I live in this I live 8-10 minutes from downtown San Diego.
Okay.
And yet I have no cell phone signal. It is the most infuriating thing. So my life is constantly like, there's this 20-foot gap in my driveway where I have to get through it as fast as I can if I'm on a call to get onto my Wi-Fi, or I will just totally lose signal.
Yep.
Even in like a very populated part of town.
Yeah.
So but we've just become so accustomed to having it work every single time.
That's right.
To your point,
Yeah.
that we don't actually spend the time to actually understand the difference between the different modes of communications. So
and how difficult it is.
Yeah, and that's in the commercial world. So
that's right.
Now let's take it into the world we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about the battlefield.
Yes.
And how complicated it is.
Yeah, 100%. And that's a great segue into because you have electronic warfare contested environments, right? The kind of world that, to your point, that we live in. our neighbors aren't trying to disrupt our communications, right? The town next over isn't trying to take down our communications or hack into them and intercept our calls and all that. So that, of course, in the markets that we serve, our customers, right, the U.S. military, militaries in general, that is absolutely the case from day one, right? So people are either trying to disrupt your communications, they're trying to intercept them, they're trying to subvert them, right? There's a whole host of problems. And so in a way, it's interesting because you do in the world that I spent in part of my career, which was mobile communications, you actually did need to think about it. So, I'm sure you've seen, there's been a lot of public dialogue and a lot of consternation back and forth just on wireless infrastructure providers, right? So you have like Huawei, for example,
of course,
right? And part of the reason for that is it's not just that, it's a Chinese company, but they've been shown over and over again to put in sort of backdoors and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that alone has put a spotlight, again, that's in the commercial market, but it puts a spotlight on how critical the communication infrastructure is for a country, right? And you would see this before, but so the thing is, communication is sort of a fundamental pillar of this. And then when you look at it on the battlefield, it's I'm going to understate it by saying like the edge cases or the use cases, right? It doesn't quite capture it, but you have hostile adversaries that are trying to prevent you from communicating, subverting, like intercept your communications. And then in certain cases now with the rise of AI is subverting it, right? So it's like putting fake messages in there, right? So we've seen some of that. We've seen some of that in the broader telecommunications industry, but I don't think it's really gotten the same kind of, it hasn't entered the public dialogue as much until lately.
Yeah. What do you think some of the biggest flaws we have right now in our military comms networks?
It's a great question. I think one is, you touched on it with the question, which is, I think there's probably less of an understanding. I think they all understand that comms is important, but I think there's less of an understanding. I think the underlying thread that I see, and there's another point you touched on as well, is understanding how these things come to be, which is like the supply chain. So there has been a lot of talk about supply chains in general and industrial capacity in the US, or let's say the Western countries in general. But I think one is understanding like the build of materials, right? Like how do you put this together? You touched on this. It's like, okay, you want this, but putting together these complicated products means suppliers from all over the world.
Totally global.
And, I grew up in Detroit, right? So you saw this in another industry, and you saw the U.S. automotive industry go through these phases as well. And in good times, they would beat up suppliers, right? But you can't ship a car without door handles. And if your door handle, it's like weird, but if your door handle supplier goes bankrupt because you've squeezed them too hard, you've got a problem on your assembly line that all of a sudden is costing you like $10 million a day because you can't ship a car, right? Without door handles.
Totally.
And so you're seeing this, I'm sure, or this is a world that you live in daily. I've lived this for a good part of many parts of my career. You look at cell phones, right? Look at the build of material in a smartphone. And I had just a funny story. It'll sound like a digression, but it's relevant to this, is that when I was at Motorola was actually acquired by Google. So that's why I was at Google for a number of years, is that Google didn't really understand hardware products after they acquired us. And so I remember meeting with my new boss, and they're like, oh, well, we at Google, we have this philosophy. We believe in A/B testing, and we do this continuously. And me being a software person for most of my career, I totally get it. I was like, yeah, I have that same mindset. But guess what? When you lock down a hardware product,
You got to go pencils down, or
you got to go
never
pencils
ship
down.
anything.
You'll never ship anything.
Totally.
Right. And so, you and I had these are products which sound like a lot, but obviously if you're the Apples of the world, this is small fry, but you've got, I need to ship 5 million of these smartphones, right? 3 million of those are going to Verizon, and 5 million pieces of Gorilla Glass don't show up for your phone because you're an Amazon Prime customer, right? You've got to place those orders, not even 6 months, it's like 9 months in advance, right? Et cetera, et cetera. So you've got this, I don't think that there is, sort of going back to the heart of your question, I think the common thread is that people don't, although they are now beginning to understand it, because I think of a lot of things that brought this sort of into the public dialogue. They don't really understand how these things come together, the supply chains that are actually in place today. And then we can talk a lot about, okay, how do we reshore? How do we do some of this stuff in the United States? And I think that's a laudable goal. We should all do it. Frankly, we shouldn't have
gotten into the position, for sure.
Shouldn't have let that go in the first place.
Yeah.
But that's where we are today.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's as good of an understanding of the supply chain, the underlying complexity, and then all of the things that go into putting these things together, number one, and then doing them at scale, right?
I assume you've spent time in Shenzhen and Guangzhou and Guangdong. If you've never been there, you cannot even fathom how good they are.
You can't fathom how good they are, and
you can't fathom how much of the industry we've shipped over there.
Yeah. Oh yeah, 100%. So I have done business in China for 20 plus years.
Yeah, you've seen the change probably.
So you've seen it. Sounds like you've been there too.
Yeah.
And so people don't realize how good they are over there. I mean, manufacturing is world class. The other thing is scale, right? And there's many aspects to that. There's sort of industrial policy, public policy, like local and municipal policy, regulations, right? So when I was at Motorola, when I was at Hewlett Packard, right, these are all scale product companies, tens of millions of units. So you go there, like I remember for just a small product line, I had, 3 football field sized, so you can use these words, but until you actually see it, right? And that's, again, for like a relatively small product. If you're Apple, right, at the scale that they manufacture, that you're like taking over cities.
Yep.
Right? Literally cities.
For just parts of the phone.
Not
even like final assembly, or
100%.
It is, you'll go to a packaging city.
That's right.
You'll go to a certain type of semiconductor that needs to go in there. It is the most unbelievable thing I've ever seen.
It's mind-boggling for people that have not seen it. But
and in the turn too, this is what we don't talk enough about, right?
Yeah.
It's in the morning I can say, hey, here's my new board design. Like within 48 hours, you'll get a turn on a new board design. Or you're like, hey, I don't really like this color.
Yep.
By the afternoon, you'll have 20 more different colors in your hands of whatever you think, whatever the thing could be. It could be a phone case.
Yep.
That you'll be able to start playing with. I mean, it is just unbelievable how fast the iteration cycle is that they've built internally there. And, to your point, like I try and explain to people, imagine you get on a bullet train, which is hard to do in this country. And then imagine you're on the bullet train for 2 hours, and all you see are factories and high rises.
That's right.
That is Southern China. That is the factory of the world. And it's not just like, oh, there's a cluster like there is here in Southern California of a lot of defense stuff. It is like hundreds of miles of manufacturing capacity,
Oh, it is.
It's crazy.
It's very, very, very deep. And the thing is, since you're bringing this up, I'm sure you know this as well. Like Southern China, that Shenzhen is a brand new city, right? So when
it was like rice farms or a fishing village 30 years ago.
Yeah. Because the real king of Southern China, or at least that, was Hong Kong. Yeah. Right now, Shenzhen has totally eclipsed that.
Totally.
And so what the Chinese have been doing, again, this is like national policy, industrial policy, down to municipal and local. So you have Shenzhen, You have towns that are 2 hours, now 4 hours outside of Shenzhen. So there's so many layers to this. So one is you not only just have like the high rise, and Shenzhen, by the way, is a beautiful city. Right?
Yeah, downtown Shenzhen is incredible.
It's beautiful. And you go to these smaller towns. The thing is they've baked it even into the educational policy, right? So one of the things here, because I had large production lines, both that were native, meaning these were Motorola badged employees or HP or Google badged employees, but then you have ODMs, right? Outsourcers. The depth of it is you have an ecosystem. So part of what you're talking about is the color, material, finish, all of these different component suppliers. These are third parties. And so you've built this local ecosystem. That's how deep it is. But then it has its tentacles even into the educational system, right? So in China, it's very easy. Part of what makes it very easy to manufacture at scale is you have graduates. Like here, you kind of have like, you either have a liberal arts education, right? So like I do poli-sci, and most of those kinds of folks don't want to go work on an assembly line for whatever reason, right? And then you have trade schools. In China, you kind of have a hybrid where, okay, I'm going to study engineering. I'll study electronics engineering. I'll study mechanical engineering, or I'll study industrial engineering. But there's a very practical aspect to that where they'll actually know how to work on CNC. They'll know how to program the CNC machines, right? Which is here kind of a technician role, right? But you have that at scale. So you have hundreds of thousands, millions probably, China-wide of graduates that you can pull from. That if you want to build a manufacturing facility at scale, or if you say, I'm going to set up a component supplier, I'm going to make camera modules, I'm going to make GPS modules, I'm going to make whatever it is, right? Screens or fingerprint modules, right? That whole ecosystem. You can do that because you also have the talent. You have that pool of talent to draw from as well.
A lot of things we're going to pull on here in this conversation. So I think one of the more interesting things here is that you're making the argument that like as we've moved away from like practical engineering into more theoretical engineering, that's where China's been able to come in and build a stable of folks who are a jack of both trades. You know what I mean? As opposed to being like, theoretically this makes sense.
Right.
So anyone who's listening from our universities, try and be more like Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo, where they actually teach you how to build stuff as opposed to like working in a classroom.
By the way, I totally, and so my son, I have 2 kids. My son graduated from Cal Poly, SLO. So
you talk
it's a great school.
You talk to people at Apple, it's one of the schools they recruit the most from because they actually feel like they graduate as practical engineers, which is a huge problem, even though you have the mammoth UC engineering schools here. They're saying it's all too theoretical.
It is. By the way, look, I went to my undergrad was at Michigan, and they don't have minors, but if they did, it would have been computer science.
Sure.
And even then, the issue with computer science immigration, I think Michigan is a great school, so it's not a criticism of them. This is true pretty much everywhere, and I think it's still true today, is that you actually, if you wanted a job as a software developer, your computer science degree is of limited doesn't help you that much, and in some ways can hurt you, because what happens, and I'm sure because you employ software developers as we do, is that business, software development, it's a team sport.
Totally.
So when you are taught computer science, you're like, here are like problems, algorithmics, and those are very, very important as a computer scientist to understand those things. But to get hired and to be successful in a job, you have to actually understand how to do that as a team.
Totally.
And so you almost have to like relearn software development or learn it from for the first time. So school doesn't prepare you for that. And I do think that that's another area that the Chinese are very good at.
So my mom's a professor, and I was just having this conversation with her over coffee this morning. For a long time, she was an admin, and now at the end of her career, she's coming back to teach, teach psychology. The thing she's basically like, hey, you guys are going to put together 5 slides, 4-minute presentation, couple questions at the end. mini TED Talk, right?
Yeah.
The kids were not as concerned about that as having to work in a team setting.
Wow.
To create the slides.
Yeah.
I feel like for our generation, well, you're a little older than me, but like it was always the public speaking that was the issue. It was never the teamwork.
Right.
But it seems like now that like because of like isolation for however we've raised our kids or however people are raised now with just so much screen time maybe, or like lack of
By the way, I think
social-
there's a lot to that. And I think COVID
accelerated it for sure.
Yeah, it made it a lot worse. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, but let's go back to China for a second. Have you read this book called Breakneck yet?
I have not.
Highly recommended. The guy's thesis, having lived in China for a couple decades and then moving back to the States, is that China is still run by a cadre of engineers.
Yes.
If you look at like who everyone Xi puts around him, they're all technocrats.
That's right.
And they're all experts in their field. And that's why they can create a policy and then push the resources of the state towards it.
Yep.
We were that way until the 60s and 70s, and now we're run by lawyers.
That's right. Yes,
And
true.
he's like, that is really one of the fundamental issues we have here, right? Which is afraid of being sued versus afraid of, versus a necessity to build the next evolution of technology.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yes. 100%.
And it's kind of just like, that's how you're diverging this stuff.
I'll have to read that book because that's been my observation for quite some time is that, and I think Kissinger made this point too a while ago, but yeah, China's run by engineers, we're run by lawyers.
So if you're king for a day and you get to, use your magic wand, I guess you're also a wizard. What do we need to do to improve domestic manufacturing, or why don't we call nearshoring as part of that as well? Because
look, I think it's difficult to fit. It's difficult to summarize, but I'll try to. I think in a broad sense, talent follows incentives. Okay, so I grew up, I grew up in an immigrant family, and I think part of what has happened in the U.S. is that we looked down upon. It didn't used to be this way, because even in the span that I've been here, there's been a lot of these changes. So we looked down upon manual labor, manufacturing, all of these kinds of things, and so we kind of outsource those because, okay, that's kind of dirty, it screws up the environment, right? All of these kinds of things. There's a negative connotation associated with that. I mean, I don't know if you would agree with that, but that's been my observation. And so you want to push people into fields like become a lawyer, become an accountant, become a doctor, go into banking, right? Services industries, right? So I think one is a mindset shift to say, like, there's not only nothing wrong with that, these are all noble fields, right? So if your son wants to become, or daughter wants to become an electrician, wants to become a plumber, wants to do those kinds of things, right? Go into construction, go do that, right? I mean, I don't want to digress too much, but like you talked about, like the way I grew up, we would, because when I first came to this country, you had cartoons were just Saturday morning, right? And then TV would end for the day at like 10 or 11 p.m. They'd play the Star Spangled Banner, and then there was no more television, right? And so we would spend my brother and I would like be on our bikes all day outside in the neighborhood, doing crazy shit, crazy stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so
doing kid stuff,
yeah. Now I think you spend a lot of time indoors. You don't interact as much, and then I think we've had this mindset, and then a lot of policy has been shaped around it. It's like go into services industries, like become an investment banker, become an accountant, become a lawyer, become a doctor. Again, nothing wrong with those professions; those are needed.
Yeah.
But how many people were turned away or even just like discouraged from like, okay, I want to go prospect for oil or do stuff like that, right? And by the way, there's like a whole, if you look at California, there's like a big part of the history of this country was that. And I think a lot of that mindset has been lost. And part of it is talent follows incentives. We have been disincentivized. So one one is that. And the other thing is, I think either from a national policy or maybe call it an industrial policy, is that we need to reinvest in these schools. So maybe make more of the Cal Polys or transform, like invest into these trade schools and expand their curriculum. And by the way, Germany does this, right? It's not like this is just the province of China. So Germany does this. Germany does this very, very successfully. By the way, Switzerland does this too. So one of my other passions is like timepieces, right? So I love watches, mechanical watches, things like that. So if you just look at the history of that industry, and that's been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. And Switzerland, for example, by the way, the United States was the world leader in mechanical watches. And that's another thing that we gave away.
We lost.
Yeah,
sure.
We lost, right? We gave away.
Fascinating.
So, but like Switzerland has kept that since the 15 or 1600s because they continue to invest in that, right? Mm-hmm. So I think the investing in like making it cool again, and there's ways to do that. Investing in those schools, investing in those educational institutions through thick and thin, by the way, right? So to give you an example, like Switzerland, you can read a number. Switzerland continued to invest in watchmaking schools even during the quartz crisis, right? So when digital watches came on and they like nearly destroyed the mechanical watch industry, so they continued to do that. They continued to try to attract people to make watches. And I mean, it's kind of like, think about it. You're like, why would I, if you're a smart person, promising student, why would you do that? It's like the car's here. Why would I want to learn how to make horses and make buggies for horses, right?
Yeah. You know, what's funny is I was just reading an article about a school in New England, maybe Boston, and I'm going to butcher it, but their whole thing was, how do you repair Steinway pianos, ancient violins? And so this trade school's been around for ages.
Yep.
I'm sure at some point it almost died, just like you're talking about with these schools in Switzerland.
Yep.
And now they have a mega wait list.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, yeah. Because everyone realizes the world is changing in a really aggressive way. I want to leave you with one last question.
Sure.
And we got to have you back on here to have a longer conversation.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
So you talked about a lot today about how like incentives like kind of drive where people go, right? And where focus is. Do you think the amount of money that was made during Web 2.0, where we were just printing millionaires, billionaires, huge companies, is that another one of the reasons why now we have to like almost reinvest in reindustrializing, because the incentives were just like, oh, software's so easy and it makes so much money. We don't need to do the hard stuff.
I completely agree. And actually there is a pretty recent interview of Peter Thiel where he talks about this. So he says software you invest in bits, and in the rest of the world you have to invest in atoms. And exactly to this point, talent follows incentive. So what happened is that, and it's still this way today, so one is through the nature of software, you can do certain things much more quickly, iterate really quickly, try things. It's not like with manufacturing, there's a large amount of upfront cost, like the investment, right? So, and there's a lot of things that have happened in software that now with things like cloud and AWS, where, even like the barrier to start a software company has gone down, right? Before, like when I first started doing software, you had to buy servers, you had to get like a dedicated IT person. So you had like this upfront investment. Now, being in this business, that manufacturing is like the upfront investment is even multiples of that, right?
Massive.
So I think what happened is that so one is that, then the other thing is going back to some of the things that we were talking about, it became less cool. It became also sort of the target of industrial policy in a negative way, regulation in a negative way, right? And so you look at it throughout. So aerospace, nuclear, right? All of these things became sclerotic, right?
We build all the parts in Mexico and then we train them or truck them up to Detroit for final assembly because we do all the nasty stuff somewhere else.
Yeah. I mean, so you look at it, I know Elon Musk is a very divisive figure. I happen to be a huge fan of his and have been for a very long time, regardless of his politics. And I'm a car guy as well.
Sure.
And I mean, Tesla is an amazing product. I've been interested in Teslas from the very first one. Like I test drove the original Roadster when it was when nobody had even heard of them.
Yeah.
And, people criticize, people now criticize, he's kind of like, he's there because of government subsidies and so on and so forth. He made a great product. Other people, and he continues to make a great product. Yeah. And the reality is that the government, these so-called subsidies, if you want to call it that, and I'm a libertarian leaning towards kind of person, but the reality is look, we live in a world, governments in general, the U.S. government, because we're Americans, let's not kid ourselves. They have the web, this world that we're living in, the software world, was really created by the U.S. government because the internet was a DARPA project.
The DARPA project, exactly.
Right?
Yep.
So the U.S. government takes a big hand in this kind of innovation, and we should be proud of it. We've created incredible things as a result of it. So, so I would like to see us get back there. I think we need to begin investing. So it's got to start. It's got to be like schools. It's got to be policy regulations, like real stuff, right? To make it cool again, to invest in it again, whether it's like subsidies, whatever you want to call it, or like government investment has to be there.
It has to go beyond 2 administrations. It has to be like, these are 10, 20-year projects.
100%.
Yeah.
It should be actually, it should be more like 100-year project.
Total.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming today. This is great.
Thank you for having me.
It's awesome.
My pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the Drone Wars podcast. If you liked what you heard today, please subscribe to catch all the latest insights for all things defense and geopolitics.